What is it you wanted me to reconcile myself to? I was born here almost 60 years ago. I'm not going to live another 60 years. You always told me it takes time. It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's and my sister's time, my nieces and my nephew's time. How much time do you want for your progress?
Hey yo, what's up, fellas? Today we're joined by Sally Hates Capitalism, Hamas's favorite Jew in America. You know, straight. Um, the best self-hating Jew in the world. How do you want to describe yourself?
Yeah, those are great. I'll go with either of this. No. You know, just a Marxist Leninist, uh, mom of three, in St. Louis, Missouri, doing my thing.
Yeah, could you describe like how you came to your politics? Like, how did you become anti-Zionist? How did you become Marxist-Leninist? Like, what do you do online?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think like my journey to get more radicalized as a leftist and then ultimately as an ML was like a lot of people's. I was very much like a liberal progressive for a long time. And I mean, I think I always was that. And I always was, cared about systems of oppression. I was paying attention and injustice, all of it. And little by little, like I think especially it was with like a lot of people, the whole thing with Bernie running for president in 2016 kind of like opened my eyes to a lot of the details, the corruption. Um, and then, but I still, even though like I was beginning to pay more attention, I realized more things about it. But even then, ultimately, um, after Bernie lost the nomination, it was Hillary. Even though I did hate Hillary, and knew she was horrible and a warmonger and all of these things. I still had that Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
I still ultimately did vote for Hillary in the election and really wanted her to win. And even though I also didn't like her, but I just, it was like, I'm just suck it up. Gotta bubble no matter.
You were enmeshed in that like system, the democratic narrative, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And but um soon as she lost, I quickly kind of realized, well, Bertie would have won. It was clear. She was always a horrible candidate, and that it obviously was not merely because of sexism or because of Jill Stein or those narratives. Um, and so I was just, I little by little, going from there, I realized okay, I'm never doing that whole Volbuna thing again. That's never gonna happen. But I still thought, we can reform the Democratic Party from within, fix the system from within. So I was still stuck in that mindset, and I supported, but little by little, as time goes on, I become more um of I think I was already anti-capitalist. I already knew that it's the system of capitalism is the problem. And then I'm calling myself a socialist at this time. And it definitely took some time before I was comfortable, understood that I was a communist. And definitely, I know I did for a while. I was saying like I'm anarcho-communist, and that was probably, I'm trying to think, because I feel like I was already calling myself that prior to Bernie running again in 2020.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I was an anarcho-communist at that time, and but I supported Bernie running again, but it was like from the get-go, it was like, he's the only one that I'm willing to compromise on and vote
Like it
for.
had to.
Eh,
Yeah. Yeah. The Bernie campaign was interesting because I mean, I'm a what you call like a red diaper baby. So like I was born into like a communist organizing family. But I used to go down to my local because even in my conservative town, we had an office open up downtown. Somebody leased out an office for the Bernie campaign. I used to go down there and just talk to people, and they were really open to like ideas. Like I'd be like, "Hey, have you read Imperialism by Lenin?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, I'll check it out." So even if Bernie himself has sort of become a puppet of the Democrats, let's face it, right? The Biden, Kamala Harris sort of camp. He's half washed Zionism. He's like anti whatever Zionist, but he's also like half APAC. Um, he
Yeah.
he opened the door for so many people to just start questioning Americanism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's important.
yeah, it is. It is like baby steps, right? You unlearn the hegemony that you were
Exactly.
the capitalist narrative that you were taught through baby steps. And I think for a lot of people, that first step was Bernie, and then they began running with Marxist Leninism, and here we are.
Well, and that's what it is. It's because really already Bernie was a compromise. And I don't think I felt that he was a compromise for me back in 2016. Because like I said, I was just a standard progressive liberal, whatever at that time. But as I'm kind of going on this journey, learning more things and getting more of that global perspective and understanding what imperialism, what US Western imperialism actually means around the world and just the horrors and atrocities every day, just a little by little understanding this more. And so by 2020, already knowing, okay, this guy Bernie is already a big compromise. I'm definitely already far to his left. Um, and but I'm trying to think though in terms of when I actually became a Marxist Leninist and realized, actually that it's about supporting whatever needs to be done to actually achieve, communism, to a socialist society to actually ultimately get there. Right. But yeah, I was just gonna say, like in terms of with 2020, when he ran again, I knew that it's not gonna be. It's I'm gonna make that compromise. That's the only compromise I'm gonna make. And after that was a done deal. It was like, okay, clearly this shit is just incredibly fucked. This system, there's no way. There's no way that it's gonna happen within this system, you know?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's so funny. If the capitalists were smart, right? Like if Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates were smart, they would have let Bernie win. They really would have, because then this left wing challenge capitalism, challenge socialism isn't a dirty word. Energy would have been incorporated into the levers of the state. Workers would have gotten a little half measure, but the fact of the matter is they are so hell bent on just holding on to like that little ounce of power that they have, that they can deny us healthcare, that they can deny us housing, that they can deny us whatever, that they will even sacrifice compromise to keep their system going. They'll even sacrifice stability, because that's what democratic socialism is within the imperial core. It's stability for the capitalist system. They would still sacrifice that and just do a Hail Mary and let us all rot. It's insane. It's insane. But
Yeah.
I don't. A lot of your
They get greedy, they can't even think about their strategies, right?
I know, but it's because the system of capitalism is both. It's both planned by people in shadowy rooms, but also it's a self reproducing thing where nobody needs to go into a meeting in order to come up with these plans. It just creates these plans through the system itself, right? Yeah, and that's why it's so illogical and everything, of course. But speaking of your online content, a lot of it is focused on anti-Zionism. So, why do you think it is so important that you support Palestine as a Jewish person?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, Israel, and I say it in quotes because, of course, it's just occupied, colonized Palestine.
Yeah.
But Israel says that they are the Jewish state. They say that they represent all Jews, and so they claim to be doing all of this horrific vicious stuff that they're doing, this genocide that they claim to be doing it on my behalf.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm a Jew, by ethnicity, by ancestry, and really because the thing is, it's interesting because I always have to make sure people understand this. Um, Israel does not define what a Jew is. And they do that intentionally because they don't want to ever be pigeonholed with that. Like they want to be able to define it in whichever way suits their interests, their agenda. And so they get to always just decide who is and isn't a Jew based on, are you going to help their specific colonial
Yeah.
genocidal agenda? And so to say Israel, I am a Jew because all you really have to have anyway is one Jewish grandparent. All of my grandparents are Jewish. I'm Ashkenazi Jew, on both sides. Um, but it's like, so I keep trying to point this out to people is that the fact that they don't define it really interesting because they claim that we Jews are indigenous to that land. And of course, obviously, that's ridiculous. And indigenous means being a group of people that's been in the same place consistently. They have their own indigenous culture. They've been there consistently all throughout the years prior to the colonizers coming in.
Yeah.
That's what indigenous means, obviously. So, but I keep asking if you're saying Jews are indigenous, okay. Well, then where are your DNA tests to prove who is and isn't a Jew in that way that you're claiming? And because and then you also so in that regard, you're saying it's an ethnicity. But then at the same time, they say it's a religion, right? And you're able to convert to Judaism. As somebody who was not Jewish before, who was not born into a Jewish family, somebody can convert to the religion of Judaism. And
But
then they can also
I'm sorry, but like if you're part of the wrong ethnicity, like Palestinian, and you convert to Judaism, you're still gonna get shot. Like it's absurd.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's not like they're gonna be like, "Oh, come on in. You can live here now. You're a Palestinian who converted to Judaism." I mean, exactly. No, because they can always just decide. And it's the same thing for Black Jews.
Uh-huh.
That they. And I was just looking at this article from 2015 about they have uh this detention center for asylum seekers,
Yeah.
and they're all African Jews, Black Jews, and so basically there are a lot of them that Israel won't let in, and then on top of that, Israel has done forced sterilizations of
Mm.
Ethiopian Jews, Black Jews. But it's clear that they're very selective with who they get to say is a Jew. But it's like, okay, if it's ethnicity, you should require a DNA test. If it's religion, well then, okay, it's religion, then you should kick out all of the atheist and agnostic Jews
Yeah.
because clearly they're not actually Jewish if it's religion. I mean, how is it that it's both? None of that makes any sense because it's just whatever helps their agenda. It's just completely ridiculous. And also keep saying, as a Jew, why would I want that is only designed for Jews? That doesn't make any sense because it's great to have a community for sure. Have a community. Certainly, if you're religious, you should have your synagogues that you can go to, all of these things. But why on earth would I only want a country of people of my same community, my same background? Because the people who, especially the liberal Zionists, they claim to love diversity. Well, then that is the complete opposite of that. And certainly, we as the Jewish diaspora around the world, but we belong everywhere that we are. We shouldn't feel the need to run and go colonize and commit genocide, kill people, do violence in order to create this land that we claim is for us, it doesn't make sense. And that's not anti-Semitism. That's not against the anti-Semitism. Of course, Zionists, they need anti-Semitism to exist to justify Israel, and they've never been against it. They don't confront it. In fact, they have always collaborated with the actual anti-Semites who are the white people, white Westerners. Anti-Semitism is their stuff. It's certainly not Palestinians.
Yeah, that whole anti-Semitism thing is such a cop out because they act as though if it weren't Jewish people, if it was like any other religion or ethnicity stealing Palestinian homes and killing Palestinian men, women, and children, that we would suddenly be okay with it, and that Palestinians would be okay with it. Like the idea that Palestinians would be okay with these people coming into their land, shooting them, taking their grandfather's house or great grandfather's house would be okay if they were Christian or if they were another type of Muslim, if they were like Iranian,
Yeah.
you know. And then also, I want to touch on your indigeneity point because I think that's such an important distinction. Israel recently has been claiming that they're indigenous. They've been using indigeneity language. Israel was founded by Herzl and the Jabotinsky, right? These people really give the modern day ideological trends. And they were very honest about what they were doing. They were saying that they're colonizing because back then, colonizing was not a dirty word. It meant we're doing great things to this land, right? We're making it right. We're making the desert green. We're bringing civilization to the uncivilized. And then around the, let's say like 80s, 90s, I'm not sure when it was, but when indigenous rights became big globally, Israel started positioning itself as indigenous, as actually like Native Americans, like Maori, like Aboriginals. But no land back movement in the world is trying to do a Holocaust in order to get back
Right.
land. Like that is such a ridiculous thing to claim that you're progressive while doing unprogressive things. And indigeneity itself is a complicated concept, but the core root of indigeneity is not who was on land originally. It's a dialectical process in which indigeneity is a system enforced onto people, right? So indigeneity is oppression, it's killing, it's apartheid, it's stealing people's homes, it's treating them as others, it's treating them as second-class citizens. So Israelis are not indigenous because they lived here 3,000 years ago. Palestinians are indigenous because they're being killed, they're being made second-class citizens, they are having their homes taken away, they're having their lands taken away. And Israelis are colonizers because they're doing all that, right? Because you have to think of indigeneity dialectically. If there's an indigenous person, there's a colonizer, right? There's has to be a yin and a yang to everything. So yeah,
That's such a good point. People need to understand that. That's really, I'm glad that you mentioned that.
yeah. So I really like your answer. Moving on, let's go over like just some common Zionist talking points. I know we already sort of went over them, but what about we were here 3,000 years ago, therefore it's ours.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we covered a little bit of that regarding just talking about how clearly they're not indigenous, whereas Palestinians are indigenous. But what regarding that, I always point out, it would be one thing to go and try to move to a land. Like, let's say the whole idea where, people say that they need Israel because of anti-Semitism, then that it's supposed to be the safe haven, which obviously that has always been bullshit. And certainly it's never actually been about the safety of Jews from the Western imperialist perspective, which who that funds it. But regarding the people who say that, I always say, well, it would be one thing to go to another country if you're trying to pursue a better life and you're fleeing. If you're genuinely, if you're fleeing anti-Semitism, you're wanting to live a good life. So you could go there with respect for the people living there and just try to live there in that way. as an immigrant and as an asylum seeker. That's certainly not what happened here with this Zionist project, because it was about taking over the land and at with violence, using violence to do that. It was always forceful. It was always, we are going here to to dominate the Palestinians, to take over the land of Palestine, to make it ours. And in fact, they had to force the settlers who were coming with them to colonize Palestine and create the Zionist Project of Israel. They had to force them to stop speaking Yiddish, which was the most common language at that time of the Ashkenazi Jews coming from Eastern Europe. They had to force them with violence, with intimidation, with violence, to resurrect a dead, an essentially dead language of Hebrew. They, yeah, they. It's just there's so many things like that where it's a fake country. You know, it's like they have to do all of this. They can't exist without Western
Yeah.
imperialist powers funding them and arming them. Without that, there is no Israel. It's a Western imperialist military outpost project. That's what it is.
If you really think about the story of Israel, it's so similar to the story, well, the story that Israel tells about itself. It's so similar to the story that we tell about ourselves in America, which is there were these religious immigrants that were fleeing religious persecution in Europe. They came on the Mayflower. They sat there and they had like Thanksgiving turkey with the natives. And then like 300 years later, we're this great multicultural, beautiful nation. And what's forgotten in that middle portion between that Thanksgiving dinner, of course, the Thanksgiving dinner is itself a problematic story told. It was celebrating the killing of another tribe, but what's forgotten in the middle of that is slavery. Indigenous genocide. Not to mention, the Mayflower settlers turned on the indigenous people that they were having Thanksgiving dinner with. Land theft. Imperialism. Like to ignore that history. And that's what a lot of Israelis do with the Nakba, right? But it's so funny. While American amnesia is like 300 years old, and our documents, of course, I'm not saying we shouldn't be unaware of it, but somebody has to do like a serious historical study to like be aware of all this stuff, and it's not through the school system. This is from 1948. Like the documentation, the filming, everything is insanely there. Like you cannot. That's why I always say, as a Marxist, our conceptions of ideology are that it's an attempt to describe truth, right? We look at the material world and we try to come up with an ideology that describes the material world the best, right? And it's never going to be perfect. Well, that's why I always say, no, Palestinian liberation, Palestine, and anti-colonialism is the truth in this case, because Israel has set up so many lies about Palestine. They've controlled the truth so much. Yeah, and it is just undeniable. They are just completely rewriting history to serve their fascist project.
Exactly. Yeah, they have to do that. That's why they have the Hasbara, which means explaining, but it's like obviously it's just propaganda
Mm.
and lies. It's like their own version. Like that's exactly what that Hasbara is those are those um, colonial lies that they have to tell in order to keep that project going.
Yeah, could you expand on Hasbara a little bit for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just the the Israeli government, basically. They have these official talking points,
Mhm.
and they have this story that they are trying to sell to the larger public outside of Israel. So it's just this, like, completely, you know what it's like? It's the what's it called, about the story that the South made up about Confederacy and
States' rights, maybe, or who? Yeah, the Dixie family. It's on the tip of my tongue. I know what you're talking about.
oh, Lost Cause.
Lost cause.
The Last Cause. Yeah, so it's like that, where they are rewriting history,
Uh,
and it's just a whole bullshit story. That because the thing is that the Zionist project of Israel can't continue to exist if they don't always have new Jews from the diaspora around the world going there. They because it's not just going to they're not just going to be able to keep having enough people. They know that first of all, they need more people to join the IDF. They can't it can't exist without all of these, the IOF. The IOF with murdering all of these Palestinians. They need that. And more, you've been seeing lately these Israelis leaving. Like a lot of them are like, I don't want to serve in the IDF. And they see, they're like, oh crap, like what if our chickens actually do come home to roost? And, what if we actually are the victims of a bombing, like what we're doing to all these Palestinians? Like we can do it to them, but no, they can't possibly do it to us. So a little by little, they're leaving. Most, a huge number of them already have dual citizenship, so that's easy for them to do. But so Israel, the Zionist entity, they understand, but they have to sell these lies about how it's a safe haven for Jews, and as if that's always been what it's about, and as if they're indigenous, and this is just their land, and it's just all of this bullshit where they pretend like it's for the good and the safety and the well-being of Jewish people. They must keep trying to sell that lie to the Western. I almost said to the international community, but it's obviously specifically like for us as Westerners.
yeah,
Um,
that doesn't influence July in other countries, obviously. Yeah. But, no, it really is, insane. The Israel is probably one of the most successful propaganda campaigns in history, and I would even dare say more successful than Nazi Germany. Like, Joseph Goebbels would have wet dreams if he could have been able to achieve what the Zionist entity has within the West, where any form of public dissension towards Zionism is completely shut down by institutional powers through just these common talking points that completely like a wrench. Like nobody wants to be anti-Semitic. Like nobody. Oh, there are bad actors in the Palestine whatever movement, like the white supremacist Jason Hinkle, I think his name is.
well, yeah, but he's horrible. Jackson Isle is what you're saying. But the thing is, people like him, they don't actually care about
Politics, and they're opportunists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 100% what it is, opportunists. They're using it to their advantage, but it's not actually and really like for Nazis, white supremacists, they hate Jews and they also hate Palestinians slash Muslims slash Arabs. They hate all of them. So for a lot of them, they have to just decide, well, which group do I hate more? And
They play this pretty well. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because it's for a lot of them, they hate the Palestinians more, and that's why plenty of Nazis, plenty of white supremacists are Zionists, but then others might disagree, and then they'll be like, well, I hate Jews more, so I'll pretend like I'm pro-Palestine. Yeah, fuck them. They're obviously not in it. They're not anti-colonial. They're not actually, they don't care if for real.
But really, it is one of the greatest. Like nobody wants to be anti-Semitic. Nobody wants to be anti-Jew. So really, they have effectively turned being anti-Nazi into you being publicly shamed for being a Nazi. Like if you say you are against Nazism, what society around you says is actually you are Nazism. You are a Nazi. Like it is, like just nobody could ever dream. Like this is the most dystopian. Israel itself is such a dystopian society. Like NPR did an interview with an American-born IDF soldier, and he said, you know, a lot of the guys who are in the IDF, they go to the office, they go to work, and then after work, they drive 4 hours into Gaza over the wall. They shoot and blow up and kill kids. They describe it like camping. And then they go back to the coffee shop. They have tea. They have a croissant. only 8 miles, 10 miles. Like I'm not sure about geographics. I'm not the best with that, but like only a couple dozen miles away from a human Holocaust. Like, what is this other than
Yeah, yeah.
the Germans, a German man, eating a kraut and whatever. I don't know what Germans eat, but eating that outside of Auschwitz, right? Like, what is this other than that? Yeah, it's one of the most dystopian, except on a citywide level, which is insane on a 2 mile, 3 mile strip. This is just one of the most insane dystopian realities that has ever been created, and it's just capitalism. Like, what can we say? Capitalism has these contradictions, and it constantly needs to repeat these cycles. And one of those cycles is Holocaust, right? World War II. The contradictions of capitalism are no longer able to be contained. There's a section of workers that are the bourgeois can use to keep them from actually being overthrown. They use that to attack another group of workers, and you create a Holocaust, right? And this is exactly what's happening in Israel, right? COVID, the global capitalist, whatever situation is bad right now. Inflation's huge. So they're using Palestinians as an easy scapegoat to keep their workers from looking at them. But speaking of the Holocaust, the Holocaust is such a big Israeli talking point. So is the Holocaust a good justification for creating Israel?
Yeah, definitely not. And in fact, it's interesting whenever people pretend like that's what it's supposed to be. Um, it's just funny that they're completely ignoring all of the years prior to Nazis taking power, prior to Hitler, all of that. And of course, Theodore Herzl started writing about Zionism and wanting to colonize and take over Palestine in the 1800s, the late 1800s. And so the movement was already underway, and they, there were already these Zionist terrorist groups, um, to create Israel. And of course, then 1917 is when the Balfour Declaration got passed in British Parliament. And so that was when Britain officially said that they wanted to basically to create Israel. They said that they wanted to create a Jewish state in Palestine.
Yeah.
And so that was already in the works.
Which yeah, we should. They had to do that to force killing the local population, suppressing them.
Course. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's like as if, well, and then of course they had the lie about, and this is part of the Hasbara, a land for a people. Well, what was it?
A land for people with a land for people with shoot. Ha! It's a tongue twister. It-
eh, something about
a land without people for a people without land.
that's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah, as if there were no people there in
Yeah.
Palestine. And, it's like just completely erasing Palestinians from existence in those other ways prior to doing it in reality with violence. Um, but yeah, so that was already in the works. They were already committing horrific terrorist attacks, horrific violence.
Yeah.
Zionist groups were in order to try to create Israel even prior to it actually happening in 1948 after the Holocaust.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a history degree, right? So like I keep a track of history a lot. Obviously, I'm not an expert on Israel. My main field of study was mostly Latin America. But it's really interesting how Zionist historians, like pro-Zionist historians, have essentially just created, in my opinion, fairy tales, right? Like what they claim is that Palestine was an empty land, and it had, at best, a couple Bedouin tribes that were just nomadic. So it just like and it's so funny how similar that is to America, right? Like they're just claiming that it was a bunch of savages playing in the dirt that didn't have any civilization, and so thusly through our might and right we took it, and too bad for the savages. And that's what I mean, the Palestinians are. They're just these nomadic Bedouin tribes that came from elsewhere that deserved it, right? Because they were savages, they didn't have civilization, and we gave this land civilization. It's such a common white supremacist founding myth, I will say. Um,
Absolutely.
and then I'll go on to our next one. Let's see. America and the EU supports Israel because they love Jews.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing and people definitely need to be asking that question. Why do you actually think these, imperialist colonial superpowers support Israel? I mean, and it's so silly to pretend as if these countries give a shit about Jewish people and as if you can't be an anti-Semite and also be a Zionist. Certainly, these two things definitely go together because, well, for one, Zionists who are clearly anti-Semites, it's obvious that it gives them an excuse to get rid of the Jews and to say, well, you Jews really don't belong anywhere else. You only that's your place now.
Yeah.
You all can just leave and just go there. And sometimes I just feel like that's what they're telling me, that that's where I belong and I need to go to Israel, which obviously hell no, that's never gonna happen. But that is like I don't they act like if Israel equals Jews, and that's our Jewish state, that's where we should be, and we don't belong anywhere else. Which it's very anti-Semitic. And um, but just obviously the real reason for the Zionist project to be funded by Western tax dollars and to use these Western weapons is because it certainly serves an imperialist purpose. It's basically just this military outpost for the US and other Western powers. And it's the same thing with all imperialism. It is about domination, it's about power, profits for capitalists, access to resources for Western capitalists, and so that it serves that purpose. So really, it's in a way, the Jews who are there in Israel are also pawns, like the Palestinians are pawns. Now, certainly the Palestinians are the ones that have it much worse as they're getting genocided. But at the end of the day, all of them there are the pawns for these Western mega rich capitalists and who are that's their imperialism that they're doing. They don't give a shit about Jews at all, and it's never been about the safety or well-being of Jews.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the it's the big difference between liberals and Marxists. How do Marxists view the world? We view the world materialism first, right? Economics first, and then ideology later, right? Liberals view the world ideology first, materialism later. And so we say, and we're right, of course, that America, Western Europe, they don't give a fuck about Jewish people. All they want is a military outpost within the Middle East to keep their enemies in check, their enemies being Iran, Yemen, the Houthis specifically, Lebanon, Hezbollah. And what liberals say is that America is doing this out of, either the goodness of its heart because it loves at Jewish people and it just has this like particular fondness for Jewish people. That's why we got to send them billions upon billions of dollars. When historically, America has never given a fuck about Jewish people. Even we are, some of our highest, recorded rates of anti-Semitism were a little bit before World War II. But after World War II, of course, the Jewish global image was changing, but Americans were still deeply, deeply anti-Semitic. When Americans were still deeply, deeply anti-Semitic, that was when we started supporting Israel. Britain itself was deeply, deeply anti-Semitic when it supported Israel. Churchill himself, the biggest backer of the project, was a deep anti-Semite. You can find quote I am. So it's such a putting the doghouse before the dog kind of thinking. It's so I don't know. It's just liberals are dumb. I think that's just all we can say.
Very.
Um, so what do you think so many Americans are Zionists? Like obviously the tides have been changing. Anti-Zionism is more popular than ever. People are questioning, but there's still this section of the American population, older, a little bit more conservative leaning, that are just firmly held on Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people in the US, they don't know the details, they don't understand the history of it and the actual reason why it exists that you and I have just discussed. But I think that it's the same way. It's like to ask the question, like, why do so many people in the US still like feel patriotic? Why do they still love America? Why do they still, I feel like it's a similar question. They just don't know the details of how horrific and cruel and violent and sociopathic the United States has always been. They don't understand all these details.
And they're never even on cable news. Like cable news has
That's another problem. Yeah.
cable news has like a 5 minute memory. But sorry for interrupting you. Continue.
Oh, no, that's a great point because it's another reason. Like a lot of these people certainly are watching cable news, corporate, they're reading other corporate mainstream headlines and news articles, and that's so they're not really actually getting the full story there. So but I think that these people think that, well, Israel's an ally of the United States. They don't really understand what that means. They don't really understand why, like how whose interest does that serve? Yeah, it's not as if working class people like we are not the allies. When you say the United States is an ally, you're talking about the government and you're talking and who do they serve? Obviously, the capitalist class. Yeah, exactly. And so, but sadly, I think most people in the United States really, when it comes to other countries around the world, they're like, okay, foreign policy is just this term where they're like, they think they don't have to pay attention to foreign policy, as they will call it, when it's imperialism. And they're just like, well, it's that whole idea of like I know Bush, I believe, said like we got to fight them over there,
Yeah.
so we don't fight them here or something like that.
That's a common talking point. If we don't get Hamas, we're gonna have Hamas in our. Well, we've already got little Galpas and universities apparently. If we don't get the beat man, Kansas is gonna go communist. Like just little lies like that. Of course, what's never asked is like, why do these people hate us specifically? Like, why don't they hate Myanmar? Or why do they hate Italy? Why don't they hate? And why are they going after Italy? Why is the whole world's attention directed towards the United States? After the first couple bombs dropped onto Gaza after October 7th, I grabbed the book, The 100 Years War in Palestine. It's an excellent book. I think I devoured it in like a couple days. It's a great history. But the author of that, at the end, he said a really great line. And I think it just sort of proves why we as Americans can't contend with Israel existing. And that's because if we have to admit that Israel is a illegitimate settler colonialist project that has genocided native peoples, put them into concentration camps, and is an unfair, bastard imperialist society, then we have to look in the mirror, right? Like we have to point at ourselves. To say that Israel is illegitimate is to say that America is illegitimate, and it is. Well, yeah, of course, we recognize that, but for so many people who are enveloped within the ruling class hegemony, right? The rich of our country want people to be nationalistic, right? Because when you're an American, when you're patriotic about being American, we're no longer rich and poor, right? We're just both American and we both have the same exact interests, right? Where I feel a lot of people have been enveloped within this American hegemony, since they were born and entered kindergarten. Their teacher told them that George Washington was this monumentous freedom fighter, right? That did nothing wrong and, founded our nation with a single snap of a finger, I'm exaggerating, but that is almost how it is taught in school.
Pretty much. Yeah.
I've even tried to like test like my little cousins, like, well, what about George Washington owning slaves? And you know what he said? Well, he treated his slaves well, right? Like he nice. He was nice to his slaves, right? Like he's like 6 years old, 5 years old. He's like repeating what his teacher said, obviously. But
Wow.
um, that's the thing. If Israel is illegitimate, we're illegitimate, and if we're illegitimate, then everything I've been taught my whole life is a lie. And I think that's just why it's so hard for us to contend with as Americans.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
So my next question is just like, what do you want for the end of the Israel-Palestine conflict? Like, do you want a two-state solution? Do you want the complete destruction of Israel? Like, what are we asking here? What is ideal?
That sounds good. I like that. So basically, yeah, I mean, but when we talk about a destruction of Israel, we're talking about the power structure of Israel. And so that must go. And
Yeah.
the thing is, but as of right now, they're actively committing a genocide right now.
Yes.
And they are, it's not only with the weapons that they obviously are dropping bombs and mass slaughtering all these Palestinians, but then also they are withholding resources. And all of these Palestinians are dying of famine, dying of starvation. And it was absolutely horrible. So I said,
Oh, I'm sorry, but what is it but just a giant Auschwitz, basically?
yeah, I mean, that's what I see. Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely just like it's a Holocaust, and I think it's crazy that people act like we're not allowed to say that and act like somehow, oh no, that's so offensive. It's not. We're not saying it looks exactly the same as
Yeah.
the Nazis in terms of like there obviously, yes, of course there are some differences, but just because you have a different group of people as the primary victims
Yeah.
of this genocide, that doesn't mean it's not a similar situation because it obviously is. Yeah, this is a genocide. Yeah, it's horrific. And it's like concentration camps in that way when you have all these people that are concentrated together. They are trapped there. They cannot leave and they are starving to death and they're getting diseases and they don't have safe drinking water. And then on top of that, they got bombs that are killing them constantly and then also getting shot by IOF soldiers. But really I say so because this is what's happening right now by any means necessary.
Yeah.
The genocide must stop. And so I don't ever tell people resisting their oppression, resisting genocide, resisting colonization, their homeland being stolen. I'm not going to tell any of them how to do that. I think by any means necessary, they got to fight for their lives and for their homeland. And I support anyone else, helping them to do that. Hezbollah, Iran, Yemen, the Houthis. Yeah, I mean, really anyone who can and should. That's excellent.
Even
But definitely,
Oh, I'm sorry, but even Russia at like I will take whoever.
oh, valiant.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, by any means necessary, this shit just has to end.
Yeah.
But absolutely, the power structure that we call Israel must go because it has always been genocidal, been doing ethnic cleansing, been having an apartheid, and it cannot exist without constant horrific violence and dehumanizing of Palestinians. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's got to go.
I feel like people who advocate for the two-state solution really have a fundamental misunderstanding of contradictions. Like the Israel-Palestine relation is one of the greatest contradictions in geopolitics right now, right? One is a country that wants to take the other countries, like their whole founding ideology is take other people's shit, take their land, and take it for ours. and another is a country that is trying to defend their historic lands, defend their grandfathers' homes, defend their olive tree farms and their wives and daughters and fathers. And when you have a glaring contradiction like that, you can't just, okay, guys, let's just redraw the 1967 borders, right? Let's just redraw the 1948 borders, right? Which nobody he was even advocating for going all the way back to 1948, the two-state solution people. Um, it's, it's, if you have that founding ideology, they're always going to be expanding. And if you have a defensive ideology, you'll always have defense. You cannot stop them when they are in this contradiction. Contradictions have to play out, and one of them has to win over the other. And of course, we all hope that the Palestinian contradiction will succeed in this dilemma. Um, and then, secondly, I think you're absolutely right. Like, by any means necessary. My friend Saint, he had this great quote. And it's been filtered to him through other people, his friend in Angola, but you cannot judge a slave for the violence it does against his slave master when it's freeing itself. And what is this, right? Liberals' conception of violence is so funny to me, right? Because violence is only when one person is smacking the other, right? Violence is not when you're depriving people of food. Violence is not when you're depriving them of water. Violence is not when you're making them refugees in their own land. Violence is not when you're walling them in after the Oslo Accords and cutting off food access and electricity access. Violence is only when one person slaps another. And if the colonizer does violence, that's okay. But if the colonized does violence, that is absolutely reprehensible. And as Joe Biden said, violence has no place in this country, and we all know that. Like we all. Um, but yeah, it's just this. It's insane how liberals are able to overlook such glaring violence and then condemn it when it's used in a liberatory manner, which is how world politics works. Peace talks, the time for peace talks, the time for negotiation, the time for settling this peacefully was in 1948, was in 1917, right? We are long past that threshold. We are now at a time where only a liberatory. I'm trying to avoid legal. I'm trying to stay within legal bounds here, obviously, but only
Yeah.
can liberate people. When FDR in World War II was asked, like, what about your war crimes against the Germans, right? Like you guys are bombing the shit out of the Germans, right? Like you're bombing and targeting civilian centers within Germany. Why are you doing that? And he said, the people are hungry for German blood, right? And what he meant by that was like, after everything that this Nazi nation has done against the world, we want to wipe it off the map. Yeah, definitely. Like, we don't want to leave any remaining crumbs in it, because if it is allowed to survive in any semblance, in any word, it is going to do what it did again, right? Is going to do what it did again. And I'll say,
That's exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
yeah, and of course, FDR is not a comrade, right? Like America did Operation Paperclip after World War II and incorporated all the Nazis into NATO and scientists and everything. But we,
And he did internment camp.
yeah, Japanese people, yeah. But we only have one solution now, and that is Intifada Revolution. And Intifada Revolution is not hugs and kisses and rainbows.
Right.
Colonialism, as Frantz Fanon said, is a force built off of violence that's an unthinking machine, and it can only yield to greater violence. But talking of that, how do we feel about October 7th? Do you think that October 7th was justified because that is such a big talking point of Israel?
I mean, it's not, it wasn't a surprise. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's what you would expect, because at some point is people that like they're seeing that all of their loved ones are being killed by Israel, by the Zionist entity, and they see that they are being humiliated, they're being dehumanized, they're being just like they are trapped. They don't have freedom of movement. They don't have any sort of hope for the future, for a better life, and everything they've ever tried, like the March of Return, they tried just walking peacefully, and then people got shot by Israel for that. And they've tried everything. And so what else are they supposed to? They're supposed to just wait to die, like just take it and be like, oh no, you just has our whole.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's also what are and that's the thing is people understand that if they were in that sort of a situation that they would support
Oh my god.
doing whatever needs to be done.
I mean, okay, like even hearing stories about like Hind Rajab or the boy with Down syndrome. I'm not gonna say his name because I don't remember it, but who was killed by IDF dogs. Or even I'm in contact with a Palestinian family right now. We try to do fundraising for them, and like anytime I get an update, like my best friend and her kids were killed, right? Like once in a while I get that, or my great aunt just died and her kids in a bombing. It fills me with such rage, right? Like it fills me with such infinitesimal rage that even sometimes I feel like in the middle of the night driving my car, going down to the bar and just like beating up a random pro-Zionist person. Can you can you imagine? Well, actually, I would target my neighbor because he has a big Israeli flag in his front yard. But can you imagine if you were in the Palestinian shoes and your father died and your mother died? If your whole family was wiped off the face of the earth? If he had a little baby and he starved to death? If your grandfather died of a preventable disease? If your mother was on dialysis? If your mother or father or daughter or your whole family, because whole families, let's not mince words here. Whole families have been wiped out. Whole lineages of people.
And even before this, yeah, and even before this, even before October 7th, they've been doing all of these horrific things, and that's what some people weren't paying attention, and they didn't realize that, but it's not as if this just was October 7th was out of the blue, like, those of us paying attention were, like, not at all surprised. We would
Got it.
expect at some point something's gotta give.
You were paying attention to Palestinian. I'm so sorry for cutting you off. But
No, you're good, you're good.
if you're paying attention to Palestinian Israeli news, like before October 7th, we were just hearing story after story of one person killed in Israeli attack, two people killed in Israeli attack, three people killed in Israeli attack. And it was happening almost every single day for like almost a year straight. Right. And it's been that's how long I was paying attention to it. So it's my personal bias, of course. It's been happening a lot longer than that. But this violence didn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, yeah, they're reacting to the violence. There's certainly, the Palestinian resistance. They certainly are the ones that creating it. They are defending their homeland. They are defending each other, their loved ones, and they see that Zionists keep stealing more and more of their land of Palestine. And they and then the whole time, even after like supposedly how Israel said they withdrew from Gaza, but they always have full control over Gaza. They always have. And they would go in there anytime they felt like it, just to rough up some Palestinian kids, to arrest whoever they wanted, to just humiliate and subjugate and dehumanize them and treat them like crap. And it's just ongoing. So yeah, what are Palestinians supposed to do? I really resent people expecting them to be like the perfect victim or something. Like, just basically just shut up and take it and die, basically. Is what
Like
people are saying.
even like when a Palestinian person says like something anti-Semitic against Jewish people, if your mother, if your father, if your daughter, if your house had been stolen by people who said, I am Jewish, I am doing this in the name of the Jewish religion, is do you expect that person to have nuance? Like, would you expect that person
Yeah.
to have? I think the fact that more Palestinians do not say like horridly anti-Semitic things speaks to the discipline, the morality of these people than the occasional, right, like the Jews killed my father and I hate them. Yeah, the Jews took my house and I fucking cursed the Jews, right? Like, yeah, it's just insane.
And that never bothers me because, yeah, like how you said, you have to understand the context that you have this flag with the Star of David, like supposedly, like this is the Jewish star
Yeah.
on their fucking flag, and that is what. Yeah, it's the whole thing is just insane. That's what I'm saying. Like for me as a Jew, it's extra. I get extra angry about it because they claim to do this like on behalf of me and my people, my entire, my whole ethnic group, and it's crazy
Yeah.
and it's sad because um that Jewish culture and history goes back so much longer than when they created Israel, and like as if just to pretend as if this fucked up, settler colonial genocidal state represents us is insane. So, but yeah, I don't blame any Palestinian who would be mad at, the Jews because they don't, to them, they don't, Israel is saying
Everybody knows it was Jews in their life except an ideal.
exactly. Exactly. But also it's so important for people to understand that the reality is that anti-Semitism is a white Westerner thing. It's a white Christian thing. And that's who created anti-Semitism, this idea of Jews being our own like racial group. That's what anti-Semitism was. So people like, throw this word around and they act as if Palestinians are being anti-Semitic or are any of us anti-Zionist somehow when we advocate for the lives of Palestinians and for the land of Palestine, as if that's being anti-Semitic. But the reality is, it's always been white people shit. It is white Western Christian stuff, and they created it, and that's always what it is. It always has been. And so it's absurd to pretend as if it has anything to do with being anti-Zionist or pro-Palestine in any way.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you study the history of Palestine, right? Obviously there wasn't, no place is devoid of hate or contradictions or injustice, right? Like no place on earth is this perfect utopia. But if you look at the history of Palestine, right? Jews, Mizrahi, is it Mizrahi? I always mispronounce it.
Mizrahi, that's how you say it. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, Mizrahi Jews, Palestinian Christians, and Palestinian Muslims lived relatively under the Ottoman rule, lived relatively peaceful lives where they would intermarry with each other, where they would sit next to each other, where they would be neighbors, where they would be friends. The only person who has, or the only group of people that have entered anti-Semitism into the Middle East is Israel, right?
Yeah.
And
That's right.
the you can, of course, you can't say that there wasn't this hate within the Middle East already, but what Israel has done is it's taken that internal contradiction and it's added steroids to it, right? It's added, I am Jewish. Hello, Middle East. I am Jewish. I am doing all these actions in the name of the Jewish religion.
Yeah.
If you see a Jewish person, I am killing your men, your women, your children. I'm trying to take over your country on behalf of that person, right? On behalf of a Jewish person in your country. And why on earth would I expect a black person in the Jim Crow South, like when it was segregated, to have enough nuance to say, oh yeah, some white people are bad, but not all white people are bad, and obviously the KKK only does this in the name of no. If that person said, I fucking hate all white people, yeah, it'd be justified to do so because
Absolutely.
yeah,
It still would today, in fact. And it's like as a white person, that's the thing. As a white person, if a black person or any other person of color were to say that about being mad at white people, at all white people, or you hating white, like I get it. I fully get it because they're talking about the system of whiteness, the system of white supremacy, and it's like, I don't need to take it personally. I understand where they're coming from and why they would say that. And that's the thing is like Zionism there in Israel it's about Jewish supremacy.
yeah,
And it's about viewing Palestinians as inferior to Jews. So like, Yeah, a similar idea to white supremacy there.
Yeah, yeah. I read this very beautiful story. It's sort of a side tangent, but after Malcolm X was killed, Bobby Seale, who was one of the founders of the Black Panther Party, he went into his front yard and he grabbed rocks. And every time a car would pass by, if it was a white person, he would pelt it with rocks, right? And after he did that, like this systemic violence, he took it out on individuals. He slowly transitioned to realizing that's got to be a political movement that white supremacy in general. Like nobody who is anti-white is going after Bob from Tennessee who drives a truck and drinks beer. We're going after a system. When black people say, I hate white people, they're not saying I want to beat up a random person. They will say I want to violently dismantle white supremacy. And I think this is exactly what Palestinians are doing. They have no ill will towards a Jewish person in New York, or a Jewish person in Spain, or a Jewish person in India, or a Jewish person in Ethiopia. What they have a problem with is the motherfuckers stealing their houses, right? Bombing their kids, bombing their families, bombing their apartments. Yeah.
And keeping them from having the right of return, preventing them, from being able to move freely throughout the land and to go back to potentially where their parents or grandparents were born,
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I can understand why they'd be pretty mad about that.
And what a great historical irony Zionism is, right? Like a people who were God's chosen people, like in the Torah, who were exiled, enslaved in Egypt, and had to find this land, right? These people have always been refugees, right? People who were done under Holocaust have forced another people to do an exodus, right? Like a biblical exodus, and forced another people to endure a Holocaust, all in the name of some historical retribution. But if you want to do historical retribution, go after Italy, right? Like go after the Romans, right? Like they are taking out their historical retribution on the wrong people, on innocent people. And of course, no, I'm not claiming that modern day Italian should hold the guilt. I'm not thinking that at all. But if we're working with logic, it's like being stupid. Uh, but as speaking of that, within their logic, a lot of, I'm a Marxist Leninist. I'm openly pansexual, gay. A lot of them will say, "Why do you support Hamas?" Right? Like Hamas would kill you. Hamas is anti-communist. Hamas is yada yada. So why do you, as a Jewish person, support Palestinian liberation and Al Qassam brigades and Hamas?
Yeah. What's the name like again of the communist group there in Palestine?
It would be PFLP, Palestinian Front Liberation.
Exactly.
Some
So if you ask them, you know, why do you support Hamas? Because they fight alongside Hamas. They fight with Hamas, and it's really interesting how the mainstream news media tries to ignore them entirely because it goes against that narrative of the Zionist narrative of saying, well, Hamas, why would you support Hamas? They hate you and they hate, queer people and they hate this and that and blah blah blah. It's like, well, okay, well, the communists there are with them, but and at the end of the day, there are very specific reasons um why Hamas has power and is the only organized resistance option with any kind of power like that exists
Yeah.
in Palestine. And part of the reason is literally because of Israel. The Zionists made sure of that. They made sure that it was Hamas that gained power, and Netanyahu is on record making sure that Hamas got funding. And that's the thing is because they wanted to utilize that talking point, like, oh, they're so scary, they're so dangerous. And then they want all Palestinians painted with that brush, like these dangerous terrorists. But at the end of the day, It doesn't even matter. Even if Hamas did have some kind of views that I disagree with, like that's not even relevant because they are fighting against the colonizers, the occupiers, the genociders who have been stealing their land and killing them and their people that are just trying to live on their homeland. So, even if they did have some beliefs that I disagree with, what does that have to do with anything? That's beside the point because it's about Palestine. It's about Palestinians.
Yeah, yeah. I was reading the PFLP strategy for the liberation of Palestine, and what they basically laid out is that Marxism is an ever-evolving science that changes to material conditions, and the material conditions of Palestine is that Palestinian nationalist liberation organizations and communists, right? So we really can understand Hamas as obviously it's religiously motivated. It is an Islamist group that is related to the Muslim Brotherhood. Um, but it is a nationalistic group, and nationalistic liberation groups within Palestine have the same exact interest as the PFLP, which is liberating Palestine from Israel. The biggest contradiction within Palestine right now is not the class contradiction between the Palestinian bourgeois and the Palestinian proletariat. It's between the Palestinian bourgeois, Palestinian proletariat, and the Israeli occupiers that are trying to completely annihilate them off the face of the map. Yeah. What does it matter that somebody is a small business owner, right? And wears like nice Rolex watches and says "fuck the poor," when he and the poor are both being bombed and are fleeing Israeli bombs. And so,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Stalin in the Comintern had a line. They said, "Support national liberation first, and then do the communist revolution." Right? You have to free yourself from colonialism before you do a communist revolution. And you know that in every single context in the world, that didn't always turn out to be right, right? Like that failed in Latin America, that failed in, it worked in China, but it didn't always work in the world. But Palestine, I believe, is one of the greatest places where that Comintern line can work. National liberation is the only way to free the Palestinian proletariat, even if it has to be with unsavory groups like Hamas, which again, as Marxists, we may not always see eye to eye with Salafist Islamists. But what's more important right now is that Palestinian girls and children and men don't get blown up, right?
Right. Exactly.
And that,
Yeah, that's exactly it, right. Like all of those disagreements about these other things can be dealt with after destroying the genocidal occupying force of the settler colonial state of Israel. So yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah, and of course, it's just insane the way that Hamas and Palestinians have been so dehumanized that they're like these savages that will kill women and sexually assault women and kill babies
It's all bullshit. Hmm.
school immediately. And of course, we have to recognize that one of the earliest jihadist groups within Palestine, the I believe it was PIJ or PID, it was actually a Maoist group that did mass line work, right? And mass line work is when Marxists go around the community and ask, "What's your biggest issue? What do you care about?" And they found out that the best way to organize people within the Middle East is religion, right? Because the people of the Middle East have this common thing. It's called Islam, and it's this very great way of organizing people. And of course, there are issues with that. There are issues with organizing people through religion. And of course, like nobody's acting like ISIS or Al Qaeda or like these great anti-imperialist groups. Like nobody's saying that. But they found out that Islam is a great way to organize people and it really speaks to people. So they became Islamists. They became the PIJ or the PID, I forget, but it was the Palestinian jihadist group. And so it's just insane. That's all I can really say.
Hmm. Yeah. No, but it's about what are the priorities
Right.
when you're with that. So yeah, obviously, like how you already said, the priority is ending the genocidal occupying colonizer force.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're gonna wrap this up. I have only two more questions left. Um, wh- do you where do you see this conflict going? Like, do you think ultimately Israel is going to win? Do you think Palestine is going to win? What are we hoping for, and what do we expect, like realistically?
I mean, it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
I like try to really stay hopeful, and it is certainly difficult, but I hang on to those little bits of positive change that
Yeah.
little by little there is more people are becoming aware of how
Yeah.
yeah, of how horrific this is, and how Israel just lies constantly. They're just fucking liars, and they constantly are just they don't care. They just mass slaughter Palestinians, and it's really and anyone who tries to help the Palestinians, like anyone that goes there who actually tries to tries
Yeah.
yeah, they all fucking die. I mean, it's insane. But so, and then, with the ICJ, with how more and more you see that there's progress being made, like the UN is saying that that they don't have the right to take this land, that it is stolen land, basically that it's stolen land. So it makes it clear that the Palestinians have a right to defend their land. But does that actually matter at the end of the day? I mean, it's hard to know what's going to actually do it. But yeah, hopefully with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, maybe Iran, and like you said, hey, Russia, Russia and China, hey, wait, what's up? I mean, I don't know.
Right.
But I mean, something's got to give, and I mean, hopefully so. More people are breaking up.
We'll take anybody. But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I think Israel is in right. They have a temporary win, right? Like they have achieved everything they wanted to with Gaza. They have leveled it. They have completely displaced and destroyed these people. They have committed horrors that Israelis have been waiting for an excuse to do for decades now. And of course, let's not mince our words here. They knew about October 7th happening. They let that music festival happen at the border. They got the greatest excuse to commit what they wanted to completely destroy a people. But it's a very dialectical victory, right? You have the thesis, right? Zionism's win, but you also have the antithesis, and that is the world has now been awoken to the beast that is Israel, right? Anti-Zionism has become global now, right? There isn't a single person in the world who doesn't know what Israel is, doesn't know what Israel is doing, and the vast majority of humans, for the first time on Earth, fucking hate Israel, right? Yeah. So every time Israel gets a victory, right, and these victories are awful, right? We can't discount how much of a human toll it is, right? Killing kids, bombing schools, bombing aid workers, hospitals. Every time they get a small victory, they also push the dialectic in the other way. The global international community becomes more polarized against it. China becomes more open to negotiating with Hamas. So the ICJ rules that settlements are illegal and apartheid, right? So these are legalistic, symbolic victories. Of course, we've had some real ones like Spain recognizing Palestine, right? That's a big victory. We've had the anti-Palestinian left Popular Front within France win. Whether or not they're going to actually be able to change France's foreign policy, we don't know. But having pro-Palestinian and not anti-Zionist figures within the French electorate banging constantly on about how fucking horrible this is a small win. And so Israel is a mighty titan, right? Like it is Goliath, right? And the hegemon of Zionism is Goliath, and the counter hegemon of anti-Zionism, we're David, and we're pelting little rocks at it, right? Like the littlest victories that we can. But slowly but surely, we are chipping away at it. Now,
That's right.
if we manage to eventually defeat Goliath, remains to be told in the history books. But I remain hopeful. right? Like that's all we really can do. Like we gotta assess the situation realistically as it is. Things are fucked. But we gotta remain hopeful. Like how hopeless did the world look during the days of Auschwitz? How hopeless did the world look in the middle of World War One? How hopeless or not hopeful, hopeless. I'm not pro Auschwitz, just for the record. Uh, that doesn't give me hope. But no matter how hopeless the world looks, we have to just recognize that there is a chance that we can survive this, and we just got to keep on fighting for that chance. Um, and yeah,
And
that's all I can really say. And then, final question. Joe Biden just very recently decided not to run, drop out. Thank fucking God. You know, I think I can speak for both of us when I say I hope the worst for him as much as I can legally.
oh, hell yeah. Yeah, fuck him. He's absolutely disgusting and horrible, always has been. Yeah.
Yeah. But the next runner up is Kamala. So can you talk about, is Kamala this pro-Palestinian fighter? Is she this magical woman who's gonna just fix all her issues? Should we support Kamala and Zion?
Definitely not. But um she will continue on the exact same policies, and it's been kind of sad for me to see people who, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised because this is why, like, I certainly no longer would call myself a progressive because at the end of the day, progressives are still liberals and they might say some good stuff and they might kind of seem like they get it about certain things, but at the end of the day, they're just in the support Democrats camp, the vote blue no matter who. And it's I have been seeing people who have certainly been pro Palestine and making like lots of great important criticisms of Israel, and then those same people have been like trying to push Kamala Harris for a while now since we all saw how horrible Biden has been doing after that debate. And so that's been really, really sad. Where I'm just like, wow, it's just because you can tell that these are people who feel like we have no other option. What are we supposed to do? I don't know. And they're trying to pretend now that she's like reasonable or that she will have somewhat good policies, and it's gonna be all same shit. By
I am now calling for a ceasefire in Gaza for 3 weeks. Right?
yeah, exactly. Like that doesn't do anything if you're still funding Israel and still sending them weapons and all of that. It's really sad. It's the same crap, but yeah, no, Kamala, we of course we have known for a long time that she is horrible, and that's why they say she's a cop, because she was this prosecuting attorney who was all about locking up poor black and brown people. And so she's all about the fascist police state, the carceral state, mass incarceration.
Yeah.
On top of obviously the same old imperialist mass murdering policies around the world, which obviously includes Zionism. So I don't really see much difference there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been doing the Zionist playbook. Like I've seen them doing that recently. You hate Kamala Harris? Well, you're just racist and you hate women. Like you hate Kamala Harris for being pro genocide. But I think a lot of people are so stuck between this binary, right? That American politics has set in and set it in on a purpose. And it's very smart that you have to either work within the Democrat or a Republican ideological binary. And that has set up there to allow America to do genocide, right? Because when you, as a Democrat, say, well, what's our other option? Voting Trump? You help America commit genocide, right? Full stop. Like you help. The system is working exactly as it is intended to do. And the fact of the matter is, nobody ever gets to that position of power, right? Nobody ever gets to the levers of power right? Nobody ever gets to be the DNC candidate or the RNC candidate without being filtered through, right? Every single person that is fundamentally trying to change the base of America, the economic structure of America, do an actual liberation is completely filtered through the Democratic, the Republican, just the American capitalist system, the binary system. And it's the same in multi-party Europe, right? Right? It's no different. It's the system filter is capitalism, right? Like let's not act like it's unique to America. But yeah, when people say, "What's our other option?" I just want them to know you are helping do the genocide. You are helping the system go exactly as it is tended to do. You have as much shame, as much blood on you as like any IDF soldier. I legitimately do believe that when you ask questions like that, and you legitimize a system that is killing, genociding, and you asking that question is built into the system to keep itself going. If you enjoyed this episode of Pokepreet Pod, consider donating to us on our Patreon, patreon.com/the Pokepreet Podcast. Thank you so much. Did what the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely made it. This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/the Pokepreet Pod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely made it. And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.